Thank you all for joining us this evening. Programs like this are an important part of Lippitt House Museum's programming, and we are happy to partner for the seventh year with the Providence League of Women Voters on our civic engagement programming. And this year is the first year that we are happy to work with the Alliance of Rhode Island Southeast Asians for Education, ARISE. We are also happy to recognize the financial support given by the Rhode Island League of Women Voters Education Fund to help us with this program. This conversation will be recorded and posted on Preserve Rhode Island's YouTube channel this coming Friday. We are going to leave time at the end of the program for audience questions, so I encourage you to use the Q&A option at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, not the chat feature. People who registered in advance should have received via email bios of our panelists and also information about ARISE, so you can learn more about our wonderful panelists who are going to be speaking here this evening, and we can devote more time to hear directly from them. For people who registered today, I'm going to put information about the bios directly into the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to turn our conversation over to Joan with the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Carrie. 100 years ago, the League of Women Voters fought to make women's voices heard. Today, we still have a lot of voices that aren't heard, that are muted, that are ignored. So the League is eager to present some of those voices here today. We have a conversation that will be among 3 student activists who are making themselves heard, with 2 older activists, seasoned people who have worked for years to make their voices heard. So we will start with a poem by one student activist.
Hi, my name is Samia Nash, and I am a youth organizer with ARISE. I am a senior at Classical, and I am excited to be here today.
Can we hear your poem to set us in the mood?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
We always talk about pushing a bird out the nest to learn how to fly. But how would it learn to fly if you clipped its wings before it plummets to the ground? How will it soar if you stopped it from stripped it of its resource it needed? In this scenario, this bird will face 2 options. It can, one, expect its early rise to higher grounds in hopes of coming back anew, or it will fall, recover, and work towards fighting and surviving, but be constantly reminded by its predators and its fellow birds of its inferiority. Those outside factors will pick at it and place obstacles in its way to keep it fighting and learning how to live every minute of its life. As life continues, it will create and breed a new generation that will follow in the footsteps of struggle and hardships while navigating new modern obstacles their enemies will utter out of pure ignorance. Now, as humans, we have this tendency to separate ourselves from viewing these harsh realities of those who are close to us. That bird is me and the Providence Public School students. We have had our education cut short. We've had our obstacles set in law, and we have seen and been the generations who have had to fight and learn how to survive on our own, while those who had their higher end, who had their wings continue to be on their arms, continue to learn and continue to fight and put obstacles in our ways.
Thank you. And now, actually, all the panelists can unmute themselves and show themselves. And now Nancy will introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Zong. I am a lead organizer with Arise, and I am also a sophomore at Rhode Island College. And I'm happy to be here, happy to make a difference and to shift the power to young people, and also working with the elders and creating intergenerational leadership. And I'll pass it on to
Nehemiah.
Great. I was saying hello, everyone. I'm Nehemiah Jefferson. She, her pronouns. I'm a lead organizer, part of Arise, and a freshman at Wheaton College. And I'm excited to share space with you all and have, these important conversations that we don't typically get to have in these spaces in regards to educational justice and the work that we're doing.
Great. And now our quote unquote seasoned activists who've been in the trenches, Raymond Watson. Please keep yourself shown.
Sure. Aquanini Tumpag, that is to say, peace be unto you, friends, in the original dialects of these lovely lands we call Rhode Island. My name is Raymond Two Hawks Watson. Born and raised in the lovely city of Providence. And for our discussion this evening, a seasoned activist. Very honored to have been invited to be a part of this panel. Always honored when the youth have some value in the things I want to share. And I'm hoping to support this conversation today and make it a very robust one. So thank you for being here and looking forward to sharing some thoughts.
And now Rochelle Lee.
Hi, my name is Rochelle. I want to welcome everyone. I want to thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this panelist. And like Ray, I consider myself a relatively seasoned activist. I'm so proud of these young people who have led the way in many, many struggles. And I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
Great, thank you. Well, let's start with the success or the challenge for the Arise students. Why don't you talk about your campaign to include civics education in the schools? So somebody start with when you decided this was a glaring omission. Nancy?
Yeah, so as a child of genocide survivors and Hmong refugees, I have never been exposed what it means to be civically engaged, and my parents don't know how to exercise their power as US citizens. So growing up, especially in the Providence school district, I never really learned about what it means to be civically engaged and how do I make a difference in my communities until I learned these various things in Arise. And I wondered and I questioned, everyone should be having access to this. Everyone should have access to the information they need to use their power to make a difference. And that is the main reason why I became a plaintiff for the Cook v. Raimondo case, where it stresses on that every student should have a quality education or access to civics education, and it is a constitutional right. So if we win this case, then it means we win for everyone. And a lot of students in many generations will be impacted because then they will finally learn about what it means to be civically engaged and how to do that.
Okay, how about, did you get any allies? Nehemiah, when the students at Arise started to think about this, did you reach out to other groups and find support?
Definitely. As we were thinking about and working in regards to the Civil Literacy Act, in case, we definitely built coalition with other groups, a part of, the Rise and Rhode Island Network. So we reached out to groups like Providence Student Union, like PRISM, like Youth in Action, and all of these other various youth orgs to really just come together and share the importance of youth voice and youth advocacy. So yeah.
Okay, let's hear Samia. Did you find people who said, don't do the suit? The schools have so many problems, it's impossible to lay another burden on them.
We have, or I have faced that kind of resistance in trying to continue to fight for something that I know is right. Um, you know, it's almost a a little level of disrespect, in my opinion, just to see that someone who I probably put into high regards, or an adult that I've seen that, always telling me to advocate for myself, or to talk up and speak up for what I think is right, to tell me, oh, just let it sway, let it roll out, it's gonna work better. But well, at that time I wasn't of that age to actually, put down or vote for what I think should happen in my school. And just to see that those people aren't doing the things that could help and benefit students like me is almost, like I said, disrespectful. You're a bystander at that point for something that that would benefit me. So there have been times where where I've had somebody just say, just let it live out, let it sway, and things will work out in the end.
Yeah, no, that's a usual. Inertia is pretty strong. How about talking about the inertia you met and what you think of this success? Rochelle?
Let's see. If I understand your question correctly, you're talking about what it takes for young people to get through the various levels of adversity and discouragement. It seems to me that there's strength in numbers, and I think they figured that out right away and built coalitions, worked on really critical issues, not just lunch meals and menus, but real important, substantive institutional change. Really, I'm impressed that these guys have not heard or listened to or abided by the discouraging messages that they probably have run across. And it's the same formula that people used 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Tomorrow, strength in numbers, and trust that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And these kids really are.
Well, what do you think, Ray, about the whole success or the almost success?
Sure. So I think that the simple fact that they're standing up for something they think is important is a success in and of itself, because as Samia just mentioned, a lot of people get discouraged from doing that, and a lot of people don't. It takes a lot to speak up in many instances, simply because that people don't want you to, or in many instances, your speaking up might actually get in the way of what someone else is trying to do. So I think it's a success just that we have young adults who are taking it upon themselves to stand up for something that they think is important. And then secondly, to take it to the level that they've taken it. I mean, when I was in high school, and I'm definitely a classical alum myself, so go purple. But I most certainly wouldn't have been even thought of trying to be involved in a lawsuit, taking on the governor of the state. It wouldn't even been something in my level of comprehension to entertain that I could potentially do. So when you see young people that have not only thought that they could, but actually done that, it can only do a couple of things. First, make you proud as someone who's been in the city a little bit longer than the rest of them. And then secondly, make you hopeful. Because a lot of times I know when I was coming up in activism, you wonder if anything you're doing actually is making an impact, or if it's going to change anything. You kind of get caught up in the everyday mundane of it, just constantly feeling like there's something to fight for. And you wonder, are there going to be any wins, and does it even matter? So I'm always encouraged when I see young people, first of all, fighting for what they believe in. But then when they give me a nod, because it lets me know that some of my ramblings and running arounds in this community perhaps weren't for naught, and perhaps encouraged others to do the same and more.
Okay. Nancy mentioned pushback. Let's hear it about pushback, because it couldn't have been smooth.
Yeah, so like just on a personal level, my parents are much older than me, and just explaining to them the importance of voting and completing the census. So believe we'll talk more about this later, but like just completing the census or voting, like a lot of Hmong elders in the community, especially, they didn't care to do it, like, because like our voices have not been heard for so long, and they just internalize that no matter what they say, things will never change. So having to break that and having to um, shift their thought process has been very difficult and received a lot of pushback from the elders. And as well with the lawsuit, where we're suing the state and the school board, and um, also like the House of Representative and Senate. Um, it's a lot of things that we're dealing with. We're not sure who to go to, or if we do pass this, how are we going to ensure that it will work well for all students in our communities and it is relevant to topics that are happening?
Well, the notion of families being supportive or cautious or disinterested or um, objecting is important. Did Samia or Nehemiah plow in on this? Were your families excited and supportive or cautious?
For me personally, my parents were actually really supportive. They definitely um, really implemented the power of, using your voice and the power of your voice in general to me ever since I was younger. So being able to have that platform to be able to share, the importance of why we should have basic rights as students in schools, that was definitely something they did support. They did, however, have apprehensions in regards to pushback from teachers, because when you have teachers who, or like you're being told and you're in this position when you're like telling these people of such great authority, like, you know what, you're wrong, that's not right, you aren't treating me right, like I don't like deserve that. Um, you can have, those very teachers and people in position feel threatened and have their power challenged, and then they, internalize that, and then it affects your grades, it affects how they view you, it affects recommendations, it affects opportunities that you can get. And those were some things that my parents was like, just make sure that this can happen, just know that, not everyone plays fair, even if you're doing the right thing, even if you're advocating for the right purposes, not everyone is going to see that or even wants the right thing to happen, because it may not, be for their best interest. So yeah, so that was definitely something they did, but they wasn't full support.
Well, Samia, were your parents politically engaged and active, or are you the activist in the family?
I actually fall in line with a family full of activists. My grandfather has been an activist since he was in college. He is 77 now, and he continues to, keep updating me on like what's going on in the news, asking questions as far as how the movement is going, because he wants to be um, in he still wants to continue to be an active member of our community. He came with me and my best friend to the protest on the 5th, um, June 5th, I should say. And he walked from the State House to the school and back to the State House. Like he was like, we're doing this together. I want to do it with you. And I was really grateful to, have my grandfather and have my parents be on my side, especially just pushing me to do this kind of work. My mother actually was the person who told me to get connected with Arise. She was like, I know Shonda and I know a lot of people who are a part of Prism because I've been there when they started it, so, keep in contact with these people because they are who you will need in the future to continue to fight for your education or just have somebody by your side as a recommendation, So my parents were full support.
Years ago, when Rochelle and Ray started to feel the stirrings of activism, did you have supportive families who were gung ho on this?
Well, I did because I grew up in a family of, I grew up in the civil rights movement, so you really had no choice. It's do or die. But there was a lot of anxiety, a lot less analysis, and certainly a greater tide of opposition that was, formal from the government in the laws, just like we have today. Ray was probably a generation behind me, so he kind of, in my mind, represents what the work we built and built upon from our the previous activists. But I just want to comment that I think one of the important things that was mentioned by the activist students is this, how important it is to support justice in front of our children and work towards it. Even if you personally have a certain amount of ambivalence, no parent wants to see their child hurt or mistreated. But it is tough to teach your child to tell the truth and to speak up for themselves and to work with others. And it may not be popular. It may not be safe. And so what they really don't talk about, I think, or what I hear in some of their comments, is the shared anxiety, the shared purpose of trying to get through it, continue to focus on the issue. This issue that they're struggling on is super important. There's no question about it. It's almost in the nation, I think it's almost historic, because I don't remember other than Ruby and, back in the 50s when, we were trying to desegregate schools. I don't remember any occasion when it's taken this much individual and personal bravery to stand up for a greater good. So, if there's a lesson that they're not necessarily underlining, it is how important that the line of support has to go generationally. The line of support has to go beyond students. It's got to include teachers, administrators, legislators. The confusion and the chaos as to who's on first and who's on second, that's a big deal when you're trying to organize and win a campaign. And the fact that that's still a barrier, I think, is something we should pay attention to.
Great. And Ray, did you also grow up? You didn't grow up in the same civil rights movement, but did you grow up with a family that was imbued with the spirit of making their voice heard?
I would say yeah, but not necessarily in terms of community service and things of that nature. My family's one of the older families in the city, so a lot of people just knew my family, and especially the woman in my family, for having an opinion and speaking on it. So I carried a lot of that natural spirit into my professional career. I would say I probably got pushback from my family, not so much because of wanting to make an impact and a change, but because having gone to college and all that, when do you start to make a livelihood for yourself, and when do you get married, and what, so those are the sorts of questions that I kind of received. And those are good questions to have. And I say that because one of the things that I learned in my activism is that in the fight, we can't allow ourselves to miss out on enjoying life, because that's what we're all fighting for, right? That's the reason we're out here. And at certain instances, I found myself so caught up in the fight that I was neglecting to enjoy life. And if that's the case, then why are we fighting? So I didn't take it from my family as them trying to discourage me from the work that I was engaged in, but to remind me that life is bigger than just continuing to fight all the time. And ultimately, what are you fighting for? Now that I'm a young father, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. That's what I'm fighting for. That's what I've been doing, so that I can pass information on to them, so that I can present them with greater opportunities, and hopefully imbue them with the knowledge and the capacity, if they so choose, to continue to move things beyond where I was able to. So from a family perspective, never, you shouldn't be trying to help the community, but you're on your third layoff in 3 years, Ray. You've got school loans, Ray. You don't have a girlfriend, Ray. Things of those sorts of nature were the questions that I got asked. And like I said, I value them because I realized that what they were trying to do, remind me to enjoy life while I'm doing the work that I'm doing.
Well, for the students, did any of you lose friends over your activism? Did any of you have friends who just said, hey, what you're doing isn't for me?
I've definitely lost. Oh, sorry, Simi, you can go.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. I definitely lost friends due to, activism. I went to Pontiac High School, which is in Foster Gloucester, Rhode Island, and it's about 98 to 97% white. So I had a lot of white friends in high school, and a lot of them grew up in a community where where I was like the first, Black student they've ever had connections with or ever had conversations with. So there was a lot of like ignorance that took place. There was a lot of me having to like check them on their white fragility, or me having to check them on microaggressions that had happened. So in this activism work and in me advocating for change, not just in the schools, but also nationally, raising attention to, what's taking place on a national scale. A lot of people thought I was, too aggressive, too loud, or doing the most. And it's like, I'm not doing the most. This is lives. This is, my life is reflected in those videos you see of people being brutalized on the streets. Like, that's my brother out there. That's my sister out there. Like, you have to understand, like, this is not me doing this for Instagram views or for whatever. Like, this is because, our lives are at stake. And for people to see that and continue to, not or neglect what's taking place, I definitely had to like reassess a lot of friendships, because it's just like, if you're not for those, who look like me, are you really for me? Are you really there for me? Because are you using your privilege in your space to advocate for those like me who don't have that same opportunity? And if you don't, then, we definitely have to reassess friendship.
What about you, Samia? You go to classical.
Um, I would say that I haven't necessarily lost friendships because I made it my goal to have people that support me, surround me. People who are always trying to be better than the person that they were yesterday. So I wouldn't say that I have lost friendships, but I have had conversations with people who were by me about things that were, um, relevant, and also an opportunity to have conversation for education. I have met some people who were just still on the ignorant side of like how things are operating. And I don't want y'all to take that term ignorant as like in a bad term. I take that as a, they're not really understanding or knowing what's going on because they're not being told, or they're not being, presented with this stuff in the media. So even in those instances, I haven't lost friendships, but I have made connections, and I have made some connections through educating others. So I haven't lost friends, but I have gained friends, and I have gained a family with the familiarity of the subjects that we talk about.
So Nancy, you were pre-med. Have you found that your pre-med classmates could care less about activism and they're just burying themselves in their books?
Yes. Yeah, like a lot of my classmates, they're not aware about what's going on. And it seems as though they don't really care about it, because their main goal is just to study and that's all. Um, but I would say for like, I haven't really lost friends, but I s- broke the connection, or I stopped the connection with some family members.
Oh,
Um, yeah. And like stopping connection with family ties could be the hardest and can hurt the most. Um, but sometimes people are not ready, and um, when they feel ready, then yeah, I will come back, and yeah, I'll be with them and
well,
help them move along. Yeah.
Rochelle, does that ring back in the day? Did you find that your friendship groups changed?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I think, that I just have to echo Nancy's comments. I think that she's right on the money. Sometimes people are not ready. Sometimes you don't know, or they don't know that they're ready, and you sort of have to be patient. But I think underneath it all, it is the sense of preserving, self-love and love, and that has a lot to do with your confidence. Um, I lost a lot of friends who probably just, we weren't going in the same direction. And then, as Samia said, I gained a lot of friends, and I think sometimes they're lifelong friends. Um, so the journey is not, a straight line. It's not even, something you can truly map out. But I think if you start out with the right tools in your box, then, you know, uh, you'll make it. You'll get through it. But it's tough to see suffering. It's tough to see, violence that's pitted against you or organized to put you to push you back. But it also is a source of kinship and friendship and camaraderie. So I think these guys are perfect examples of how to get through stuff together. And, you know, I think their voices are extremely useful and relevant to all of us, whatever generation you're in and whatever level of activism you've participated in. It's important that we learn from these guys.
So Ray, did you also have a shifting of your friendships?
Uh, yeah, I would say in certain instances, I was the one who instigated it, particularly on a professional level. And that was because as I got involved in the community work and realized how important it was, you start to look at the people around you who say they're doing the same thing in different contexts, and you start to ask different questions based upon your understanding and your perception of what should be happening for the community, and you don't get answers that add up. um, and then you even start to receive some almost negative treatment and feedback for even asking questions. So I'm not one to ever be good in that situation, in terms of, like, well, all right, well, I'll keep poking the bear, and in doing that, yeah, I had some people in some pretty prominent positions in the community development, field in the city of Providence and beyond, uh, get highly upset with me. But my thing was this: I'm not here to be your friend. I'm not here for a popularity contest. In certain instances, I'm not even here for a paycheck. I'm here because I'm committed to this community. And if you're in a position where you have influence, where you have a voice that people listen to, but you're not utilizing that to the benefit of the community, well, then, friend or otherwise, why are you here? And why aren't you making way for others who do want and who are committed? So what I found was that when I started to speak up in that regard, others felt empowered to speak up in that regard as well. And I think what a lot of people in my generation of activism did was kind of present a context where it wasn't, we used to get this thing, you want to keep the dirty laundry in the community. And I get that to a certain extent, until the whole house is full with dirty laundry and
Oh,
no one's cleaning it. So at that point, we got to get rid of some of this dirty laundry. So I feel like myself and others who were kind of in that same sort of generation, we kind of started that dialogue, that this notion that keeping our dirty laundry in house because it's good for our community and we don't want to look bad in front of who? We're already doing bad. All right. There's violence going on. There's poverty. So who are we faking and trying to pretend we're okay for? No, we're not okay. And in my opinion, you're one of the reasons why we're not okay. So absolutely. And I would say for anyone who's really, really committed to wanting to make change, I don't care where you're at. It doesn't have to be the community. It could be anywhere on the basketball, wherever you're at. Be prepared to run into some people who don't want you to do that and who are going to be upset. But if you retain integrity, and if you remain committed, and if you are honest about what your intentions are and what your goals are, what you will find is that for every one or two people that are angry at what you're doing, three or four pop up thanking you for what you did, and wanting to know how they can support or wanting to share what they're doing. And that's the part that keeps me going, that there's people out here who are feeling like I was at one time. I'm the only one doing something. I'm trying, but nothing's changing. The system's too hard to change. And that's clearly not the case. We see it all the time. It's when people get activated and when people remain committed, that's when change happens. And once again, just to bring it back full circle, What these young adults are doing with this lawsuit is just that. It's them taking it a step further than what we did, because we didn't sue anyone. Prism and them got into that after I was there. So Prism and them took it up a level for me, and and it keeps going. So I encourage everyone to do your part, do what you can, do what you have the ability to change, and trust that creator is going to take care of the rest of it, because we're all just individuals and we can only do what we can individually do. But when I do what I do and you do what you do and he does what she does, he does and she does what she does, well, now you've got something going on there. But none of that happens unless each of us individually decides to make that change ourselves. And once again, expect to have conflict. You don't make change without conflict. If you're looking for an easy change process, then you're in the wrong business if you're trying to do things in the community.
Okay. What about looking at your audience? You can't see the audience, but figuratively looking at your audience. What do you want the audience to know or do or hear? There you are, making your voice heard. What do you want the audience to do? I mean, do you want the audience to um, pay for better schools? Do you want a fairer census? Do you want different people to run for election? Um, your case, your court case, whether you win or lose, you still are shouting to make your voice heard. So what is your next step, and what do you want the audience to do beyond the court case? So this is a tough one, but Samia, what would you like from
Um,
the audience?
if you are an adult or if you are a person in power, definitely believe the people who are in these situations. um, Believe the students, believe the teachers, because they are the ones that are impacted the most. And sooner or later, if you decide to have children in your near future, or if you have children now, your children will most likely be in that situation too if you decide to put them in these schools the way that they are in. So I would say believe, because you may not be in their situation, but they are definitely living in it, and you have to believe their perspective. If you are a student and you are in these schools, stay active. Stay active. Talk with your friends. Keep a conversation going. If your school's not having a conversation about it, that should be you and you having a conversation with your administration, being like, "Yo, why are we not talking about this? This is definitely something that's important to me, and may not be important to you because you're the person who's in power, but I am the person that is going to be impacted the most."
Okay.
So you guys keep active, and even with being active, give yourself some time to rest. There can be burnt out, definitely burnt out, but don't let that discourage you from continuing to take and get what you deserve. Okay, so I'm saying, students, stay active. Adults, believe these students and believe these people and families who are going through these situations.
Okay. Nancy, Nemiah, do you have anything to add on what you would like people listening to take away from this? Okay. No.
I
Okay.
would just
Well,
add more to Samia. Really, if you're an adult and you have power, um, let's say you're a teacher, um, try your best to shift the power so that young people can also lead, and also help them build the skills they need to advocate for themselves. And um, most importantly, um, if if possible, support your community-based organizations. It could be anything. Just support us, and if you can, also make donations, because we all need to survive in the system as well. So yeah, we need to continue working with different types of generations and coming together, different type of races, and just bringing everyone together.
okay. Um, to veer a little bit away from your court case to schools in general, had any of you found fault with the overall quality of your school's education? the absenteeism, teachers' absenteeism, curricula that you found lacking, preparation that you found less than rigorous, turnover of staff, the complaints that we read about all the time. Um, had that entered into your discussions of activism, that there were students in more suburban communities that were leaving high school better prepared, schools with lower truancy rates, lower dropout rates, lower suspension rates, schools that were doing better by their students? Had that entered into your thoughts at all?
Most definitely, they've entered into our spaces when we had these conversations. As looking at these and comparing these different high schools from more suburban areas and more urban cities, seeing like what's going on, what's the trends that we see and the issues that are showing up in these various schools and why it's happening, what has happened in our history that transcends to now, into the reasoning why there's absenteeism, why students are getting access to the same education, to equal education. When you think about redlining, when you think about housing segregation, and how that now affects the opportunities that are given into various schools, and how schools are still segregated. Like, yes, it's not by law allowing schools to be segregated, but they are still segregated. So just looking at those various trends, looking at even adultism and various isms that are present in the space, simple racism that's present in all of these terms and ideologies that are rooted in white supremacy, and how it's evident in our schools. So we definitely do have those conversations for sure.
Ray, Rochelle, Ray, let's start with
Could,
Ray.
let me just, could I just add a comment to, because I don't want to lose the power of Nehemiah's statement. But I think underneath all of this is who controls the narrative. And I think that we have to pay attention to how the story is told. So the school experience, I think everybody figures because they went to school that they know what everybody else was experiencing in school. School is the same as it was 50 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And that's simply not true. But what is true are some of the symptomatic issues. For example, structurally, the unions and agreements between the schools administration and education are not necessarily aligned by any stretch. If you get a good teacher and happens to be young, they're the first to be laid off. If you get a particular course that's not approved by the Department of Ed or don't seem to fit into their agenda, that's not discussed. Teachers, they talk about teacher absenteeism. I mean, having been in the Pawtucket schools for 10 years, I know that you can't, as a teacher, take 20 minutes off to go pick your kid up. You take the whole day off or nothing. There's no compromise. So you look at teachers who take the day off, they may not even need more than an hour off to do something, but they have to take the whole day off. And then it becomes weaponized, both by the teachers and by administration. So who's in the middle? Students. What's at stake? Their education. So I think, like Ray was saying, there's a lot of people not going to be happy to hear about some of the fine details of what it takes to get a good public school system going, but these are the hard cold facts. These kids are telling you the truth. Schools are not the place we thought they were in many years ago. And they certainly can be, but today it is not a staff, student, or teacher-driven environment, unfortunately. And I won't even mention the exclusion of parents on purpose, like lock the door so the parent can't come in the building, that kind of stuff. So we got a lot on our hands.
Ray, do you want to chime in on you're closer to high school than Rochelle.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, I just want to take a moment on behalf of adults to apologize to our youth for the preposterous situation that we've allowed you all to be put in, that you have to actually sue the government to get a civics education. Like to me, I don't know how you can be an adult in this state and not be embarrassed by that's going on. No matter what your political leanings are, no matter what community you come from, the fact that young people have to actually sue the state because they want a civics education, how would we expect future generations to be successful and productive members of society if they don't even know civics? And I think if you look at the situation that went on January 6th, that's a clear example of where we could be heading en masse if people don't fully and properly understand how the system works and how to engage it effectively. So that's the first thing I want to do. And then secondly, um, I just want to commend our young people. That's all. I don't want to be labor anything that adults haven't been doing, because there's a lot that adults haven't been doing, and I don't want to praise things that adults have been doing because adults are supposed to be doing those things. I view the world as we're borrowing it from future generations. So when we get it, our goal should be to leave it better off than we got it, because we're borrowing it from those who aren't here yet. And when I look around us a lot of times, especially when it comes to our youth, I don't see any value in that perspective, which I believe is the reason why things are in the space that they're in right now. And once again, the simple notion that youth have to sue the governor because they want to sit, and that there was pushback, there was a counter argument. The fact that there was the gall to have a counter argument to students who want a civic education, we should all be embarrassed, whether you're involved in the community, whether you gave everything you ever had to make it better for those around you. We should all still be embarrassed because there's absolutely no justification for it. And we most certainly can't say that we're doing what's in the best interest of our future when we're telling students that your interest in the most comprehensive and robust education you can get in our state, we don't want to support that. So once again, I just take my hats off to the youth. Thank you for the invitation to be on this panel today. And I'm so excited to see what you all will do when as you move forward into adulthood, because I got my little people coming up after, and I'll be excited to be hearing them talking about how they look up to you all and that you all have encouraged them to do the things that they're doing.
I just want to.
I'm going to pop in here for a minute as one of the Lippitt House staff and say we've sort of moved into our Q&A section, and want to invite you all to ask the questions that you have not been able to ask of each other yet tonight. And Rochelle and Ray, I'm wondering if you have questions for the students before we wrap up. Or Samia and Nancy and Nehemiah, if you have questions of Rochelle and Ray, things that are burning.
I one, and they don't have to answer me on film, but I just like to know the names of the adults that have been problematic, because that's adults.
Yeah.
We're not to discuss that online, but feel free to pass that information along.
Trust me, Ray is dead serious. I have seen it with my own two eyes. By himself, holding people accountable, period. And he knows I know. So this is a good guy to know. Let me just ask you guys one really quick question. If you were to write the story of what this journey has been so far, how would you describe it? I mean, I think I have a pretty good idea, but on the spectrum of, it's changed my life. It's something I'm, never going to stop doing. I mean, how do you see yourselves in 5 years?
I think Nancy sees herself in medical school.
Yes, 5 years medical school, advocating and fighting for health equity and access to resources just to be healthy and stay well, to continue doing the work and continue um, just shifting the power and changing the narrative.
I think on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Ray brought up the elephant in the room of democracy, January 6th, which alarmed so many people that our democracy is far more fragile than we thought. So I am ecstatic that you students are involved, that you're interested in civics, that you're interested in the census, that you will motivate people to vote, to march, to demand, to fill out forms, to not just sit back and accept the status quo, because our democracy depends on your speaking out and your voices. We all have January 6th as an awful memory. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Joan, for saying that. And I'll say one of the questions that we got from one of our audience members connects with that in terms of generally civics' approach through US history. And when you were fighting for civic education, are there specific topics that you wanted covered in civics courses, or or was it also something bigger that you wanted in education? Could you speak about that?
Oh God. I was just gonna say that with civics education, we tend to have this narrow narrative that is just about the history. It's just about this, but civics education goes a long way. Like the spectrum of civics education is so wide and so, versatile that, it's important that we talk about it as early as possible. Um, one thing that I didn't learn prior to being a part of Arise is learning how to write a testimony or be able to testify towards a House bill. One of the House bills that I testified for was the Civic Literacy Act, which is to incorporate civics education from 8th grade up to 12th grade and have children have at least a semester of civics education so that they learn how to survive and live as a person of this nation, regardless of your citizenship, regardless of your resident status, like to be able to be a person of this nation, So with civics education, I think that, yes, we should talk about the history, but not just US history. We should talk about how US history has been inspired by other people outside of the United States and the people who have been brought here. The United States was not built by white people. They were not built by white people. They were built by Black and brown people. They were built, they were brown people before white people were here. So just to talk about just the history before the Europeans came here, before they came to create, and I say that very lightly, this world that we're living in right now is just important. We need to understand that civics education isn't just the history of the United States, it's the history of other people, and also just how to prosper as those generation, like the future generations of those people who have been here. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, for sure. Just to even add on to what Samia was said, we are also just fighting for a shift in curriculum. For years, we've just been taught in this Eurocentric lens, in this lens of, those who are of majority. We are not taught in the eyes of, power, privilege, and oppression. We are not taught that we can hold office, or how to hold office, how to vote, how to participate in our community, how to act as we all have the right to act as citizens of this country. Even as Samia is saying, bringing up historical transitions, and on a global scale, and how different cultures have also emerged to create what America is today. We're not taught about that. To even talk about African American history and have slavery be subjected to one paragraph on page 400 of our textbooks, that's not okay. So this whole shift in curriculum needs to happen, not just on a civic level, but in every aspect. I mean, even thinking financially, why am I getting out of high school and I don't know how to balance a textbook checkbook, or know how, what a mortgage is, or how to, have good credit, why aren't we taught that? How to invest in stocks, so this whole shift needs to happen in curriculum so that way we can be more prepared to not only survive, but thrive. So.
I just want to add one more point, just to further on about the conversation of civics education, is just that we don't have the constitutional right to an adequate education. And that is a huge, huge problem that is not on the agenda of making America, future America and future United States of America better, you know? It's not great. It was never great, but we can work to making it great by having this right to having an adequate education, be on our agenda. These students need to learn. These teachers need to learn. These parents, these families need to learn what it is to be, what it is to be living without struggle. That's what I want to say. It's difficult when you're always struggling, when you're always fighting, when you're always, wondering, oh, how it's going to be for my little brother, how is it going to be for my children, how is it going to be for my grandmother, knowing that, she hasn't been able to be taught this sort of important task and important information. So just seeing that we don't have the right to an adequate education, while we have the right to bear arms, while we have the right to assemble, while we have the right to be here, it doesn't seem like, we have the right to anything, since we're not being able to be educated on the things that we need to know.
Well, we have certainly heard your voices tonight, and I suspect that in this next year, more legislators, more judges, more senators, more politicians will hear your voices too. And in a few years, I expect to see some of you running for city council, running for General Assembly, making out petitions. I expect all of you to vote and to fill out the census forms. So on that note, I'm turning it over to Kathy Saunders. Again, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you very much for coming.
And on behalf of Lippitt House Museum, thank you so much. This was important. This was powerful. This was a privilege to be privy to this conversation. And thank you for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your perspective, and your passion with all of us. And really just quite moved by this. And I hope to be able to be in more conversations with you in the future. And thank you to all the attendees who came. We had a wonderful turnout. I hope that you are as inspired as I am by this, and that you go out with a renewed passion to listen to voices and listen to the voices of young people. And I also want to invite you to join us next week, next Monday at this same time. We have a conversation with students from Reentry Campus Program, people who are formerly incarcerated, adults, and they will be speaking with Judge Melissa Long and Representative Scott Slater in a similar format as this. And I hope that we all come back with a new perspective on what it means to truly have democratic participation for all of this. And with that, we close our webinar and hope that you all enjoy the wonderful spring that is coming. And I wish you students wonderful scholastic and activist careers. And thank you so much, Ray and Rochelle. And for those of you who haven't seen in the audience, there have just been these wonderful comments that people have given the panelists, sort of praise about them speaking truth to power. And we did want to end this around 7 o'clock. So I'm sorry we weren't able to take some of those last few questions that came in, but please be well and take care of yourselves out there.